I can safely say this is the slimiest and one of the most unique Sega Genesis games out there that not a lot of people have played or maybe even heard of. And if they did try it, they probably didn't get very far due to its generally unforgiving difficulty. But I'm happy to report, after a long drawn-out struggle stretched out over multiple years, I've finally conquered this viscous monstrosity and ready to give my personal take on the OOZE. Released somewhat late in the life of the Sega Genesis, the OOZE was developed by Sega Technical Institute, Sega's US-based studio that previously helped with multiple Sonic games and also produced hits like Kid Chameleon, Sonic Spinball, and Comix Zone. The OOZE was even considered to be included as a pack-in game with the handheld Sega Nomad system, but instead saw a mostly worldwide release by itself in 1995. The Japanese Mega Drive version is notably one of the most rare and valuable games for the system, with some pretty bizarre packaging. For starters, the cover art looks like censored newspaper headlines with a reversed version on the back that needs to be put up to a mirror to decode its cryptic message, and the instruction manual includes a cute bunny girl explaining the game to you along with her blood type, measurements, relationship status. Yeah, they basically just went totally off the wall here. Anyways, getting into the game itself, it fires up with a comic book-like cutscene and lore dump. You play as Dr. Daniel Kane, a scientist who discovers that the company he works for has been using his chemical research for a nefarious plan of unleashing a toxic gas upon the world while they hold the only cure and can sell it at whatever ridiculous cost they want. Once the corporation discovers Kane has realized this, they of course inject him with the chemical and flush him down the toilet. But instead of dying, he is transformed into a sentient toxic puddle of ooze hell-bent on revenge, and he embarks on a quest to stop the corporation and hopefully change back into human form. So you are controlling this puddle of slime in a top-down action framework with the ability to extend your goopy tendrils to smack and absorb the flesh of any enemies in your path, or also to set off various switches that open up new areas of the stage. You can also spit little slime ball loogie projectiles at your foes at the cost of a small amount of health. And rather than a typical health bar, your remaining life is essentially the size of your blobby body, and a bigger blob can also make you more susceptible to damaging foes and hazards, which is one of the most intriguing design elements of this game. Sometimes if a laser or something cuts through part of you, you can still go back and recover little bits of slime to restore some of that health. But if anything hits you in the head, it's an instant death. There are a handful of pickups as well, like temporary speed boosts, invincibility, checkpoints, extra lives, and the optional collectible DNA helices, which you will need all 50 of in order to see the best possible ending after completing the game's 5 levels, which are each split into 3 sections, and each ending with a boss fight. Now, before I unload all my gripes, there's really a lot to like about this game. The gameplay mechanics behind this whole ooze puddle thing are really creative and impressive for its time, and it makes for a very unique experience on the console. It's also oozing with that edgy Genesis attitude, with very solid graphics, music, and burp sounds that are a great fit for building this B-movie Toxic Avenger-like vibe. The controls are weird at first, but it's functional once you come to grips with some of the nuance and your rather fluid hitbox. Despite all of this, the OOZE is generally an immensely frustrating time and feels like so much potential went down the drain. Now, I love a good hard game every once in a while, but the difficulty curve here is pretty insane. You start with 3 lives and no continues, while your only hope to last longer is to take more time exploring the stages in hopes of finding 1-ups, often hidden behind highly hazardous obstacles that might just cancel out your efforts anyway. The first level starts out pretty reasonable as you learn how the game works, but it doesn't take long before you need to endure through numerous instances of trial and error to find the safest paths through the sometimes rather expansive stages. And you'll have to do a lot of exploring to find the correct switches or warps to make progress, with the enemies and hazards getting more and more trolly as you go. The power core area is especially evil, with all sorts of traps and dirty tricks that you basically need advanced knowledge of in order to survive. and that's not even considering getting every single DNA pickup in each level, which further multiplies the challenge immensely, and this is a task I did not attempt. To make them even harder to find, some of the DNA is further hidden within obscured bonus stages where you have to devour a bunch of rabbits in a certain amount of time. Even getting the bad ending, where you're still stuck as a slime ball, caused me enough strife and suffering that I have zero desire to try for the better ending, which is marginally different anyways. It's not so much the trial and error that bothered me, but combining that with the lack of continues and the amount of time it takes to get through the larger switch-heavy stages made replaying the game pretty tedious. And I'm not sure if it was out of pure determination or luck on my part, but once I got to the game's final world for the first time, I was able to get through it fairly easily, so there's a weird imbalance there after the power core stage took so much work to get through. That was a level that truly broke me the first time I tried beating the game on stream back in 2020. And after several days of attempts, I completely gave up on it, until over 3 years later, I decided to get my revenge and finally slog through it again. And for the final stage and boss to be such a cakewalk was a little bit unsatisfying, but I'm still super relieved to finally be free of my slime-encrusted prison. You win? Yes! Ah! It's over! It's finally over! I think an option to continue or a password system would have helped a lot to make the game more reasonable. There is a level select code, but it's kind of absurdly complicated to execute, not to mention you won't be able to amass as many extra lives if you skip ahead. If you're not a glutton for punishment and still want to see this game through, you might consider using save states if that's an option for you. Now, I try to stay as positive as possible when surveying these old games, and on paper this could have been one of my all-time gross-out favorites on the Genesis. While there's certainly some disappointment here, I still have to recommend at least trying this one out, purely based on its uniqueness and concept, and I'll always applaud developers' attempts of trying something so off-kilter like this. I guess I would say to just be patient if you do take the plunge into this slimy, mucusy mess, and maybe you can keep your sanity from flushing down the toilet.